Hello everyone, 大家好, and welcome back to Bitesize Mandarin. So this is lesson 4 and is based on the study article for the week of October 2nd, 2023. Now before we get to the main points for this lesson, just a quick recap of a grammar point from lesson 2. So as you may remember, 在方面 means with respect to, and we can take whatever it is that we want to highlight and just drop it in between 在方面 to mean with respect to that thing. So that was from lesson 2, but in the study article for this week, there are 10 instances of this structure. So for example, in paragraph 1, 在什么方面基督徒必须像树木一样? In what way or in respect to what must Christians be like a tree? And in paragraph 12, 在灵活变通方面，使徒保罗是我们的好榜样。The Apostle Paul is an example for us in being adaptable or in respect to being adaptable. And another instance in paragraph 14, 耶和华没有在衣着打扮方面立下严格的规定. Jehovah has not set strict regulations regarding dress and grooming. So here we can see that 在方面 is actually being negated by 没有. So this is another way that we can use it. So that's just 3 examples, and altogether there are 10 in these paragraphs here. So it's worth checking them out to see how 在方面 can be used in different ways. Now to crack on with the main points from this week's study article, and we're looking at this sentence from paragraph 4. 他从来不会严苛死板. He is not rigid in his dealings with humans. And we want to focus on this phrase here, 从来不会, which means never. And so if we go back to this sentence, he is not rigid in his dealings with humans, we could say he is never rigid in his dealings with humans. So 从来不会 means never, and in spoken Mandarin this is often shortened to 从来不, and in fact is often shortened even further to 从不. And so that's the version of this phrase that we'll focus on, 从不. So all of the other longer forms are valid, but in spoken Mandarin, people often say 从不. We'll also look at a related word, 从来没有. And as you might have guessed, this is often shortened to 从来没 and further shortened to 从没. So we're in Never Never Land. 从不 means never. 从没 also means never. So it will be easier to understand their differences by seeing them in example sentences. So let's look at 从没 first. 他从没吃过饺子. He has never eaten dumplings. So perhaps the most important thing here to highlight is the presence of 过 after the verb 吃. And 过 is an indicator of past action for a verb or an indicator of past state for an adjective. So that's why 过 often appears in sentences with 从没 to tell us that something has never happened before. Something has never happened in the past. And we can see how that works in this sentence here. 吃 eat. 吃过 eaten. 吃过饺子 eaten dumplings. 从没吃过饺子 never eaten dumplings. 他从没吃过饺子 he has never eaten dumplings. So in other words, never in the past has this person eaten dumplings. So this is 从没 verb 过. Now contrast that with 他从不吃饺子 he never eats dumplings. So what does that tell us? As a habit, an ongoing continuing situation, he does not eat dumplings, i.e. he never eats dumplings. So this is the difference between 从没 and 从不. Let's look at more examples. 我从没看过足球比赛. I've never watched a football game. So never in the past up until this point in the present have I watched a football game. And contrast that with 我从不看足球比赛. I never watch football games. So this is habitual, an ongoing habit or as a general rule. 上帝从没说过谎. God has never lied. Never in the past up until this point in the present has God lied. 上帝从不说谎. God never lies. An ongoing habit, a general rule. He never lies. Now here we can consider another point. So as mentioned, 从不 is an abbreviated form of 从来不会. But when we see 不会, which we know in some contexts means will not, we might be tempted to think, well, doesn't 上帝从来不会说谎 mean God will never lie? But actually, 上帝从来不会说谎 has exactly the same meaning as 上帝从不说谎, i.e., God never lies. So the question is, how do we say God will never lie? 上帝永远不会说谎. So as you might know, 永远 means forever. So it's like saying God forever will not lie. So from now, this point in the present, right into the future, God will not lie. So let's look at it on a timeline. From the past up until this point in the present, 上帝从没说过谎. God has never lied. And in the present, an ongoing habit, an ongoing situation, 上帝从不说谎. God never lies. And from this point in the present right into the future, 上帝永远不会说谎. God will never lie. 从没 verb 过 has never verbed, that's the past. Present, 从不 verb, never verbs. And the future, 永远不会 verb, will never verb. So just before we move on from this point, we can also ask the question, what is the difference between 从不 verb, never verbs, and just simply 不 verb, does not verb? For example, in these sentences, 我从不喝酒, I never drink alcohol, and 我不喝酒, I don't drink alcohol. Well, even in the English sentences, we get a sense of a stronger emphasis of the word never as compared to the word don't. And that's the case for 从不 versus just 不, in that the 从不 sentence has more weight to it, a stronger emphasis. Secondly, 我不喝酒 can mean I don't drink alcohol, but for specific circumstances, it can also mean I won't drink alcohol. So for example, 我不喝酒因为我是开车来的 because I drove here today. So there's a reason on this specific occasion that I won't drink alcohol. 我不喝酒. That means that it wouldn't be correct to use 从不喝酒 in this instance, because that tells us that a verb does not happen as a habit, as a general rule. So it would be like saying, I never drink alcohol because I drove here today, which wouldn't make sense. Now, similarly, when we look at the differences between 从没 verb 过 and 没 verb 过, there is again a greater emphasis on 从没. Take these sentences, for example. 他从没吃过辣的, he's never eaten spicy food. 他没吃过辣的, again, he's never eaten spicy food. So we can see these sentences are almost identical in meaning, except 没吃过 is less emphatic and could just be a normal, unstressed response to, oh, do you know if Jim Bob has ever eaten spicy food? To which we might reply, 他没吃过辣的. Whereas if we see Jim Bob just absolutely beavering away at a jar of jalapenos, then we might say, 他从没吃过辣的. How is he able to polish off an entire jar of jalapenos? So that's just an example of the emphasis that 从没 brings to a given sentence. So just to recap on what we've discussed, 从没 verb 过 means has never verbed, 从不 verb means never verbs, and 永远不会 verb means will never verb. And in a given sentence, 从没 verb 过 and 从不 verb add greater emphasis than their counterparts. And now it's back to the main article for another point, And this time we're looking at paragraph 5. This sentence here, 尼尼微和其中邪恶的居民 Nineveh and its wicked inhabitants. So we'll take a closer look at this word here, 其中, which you might have heard many times. It means among them, in it. And the question is, what is the them, or what is the it being referred to here? Well, if we were to pleco the word qi, we would see that one of the definitions is it, referring to the preceding noun or the noun that comes before it. So back in this sentence, 尼尼微和其中的邪恶的居民, what is the noun that comes before qi? It's 尼尼微. So in this case, qi, it, referring to the preceding noun, refers to 尼尼微. So qi, meaning it, refers to the preceding noun. So that explains that part of this word. But what about among and in? Well, this is where the word 中 comes into play. It means in, among, or amidst. So once again, going back to this sentence, but slightly altered to read 尼尼微中邪恶的居民, the wicked inhabitants within Nineveh. So altogether, this sentence from paragraph 5, 尼尼微和其中邪恶的居民, if you were to translate it more explicitly, the English would be Nineveh and the wicked inhabitants within it. So, 尼尼微和其中邪恶的居民. Now, of course, if this random Ninevite decided to pop over to London to visit the Assyrian exhibition in the British Museum, he would still be a Ninevite, so still technically an inhabitant of Nineveh, a 尼尼微的居民. But for the period of time he's in London, he's not an inhabitant within Nineveh, so he's not a 其中的居民. And that's what 其中 really does. It emphasizes that something doesn't just belong to something else, it's within it. 圣经和其中的内容, the Bible and the contents within it. 研读圣经并沉思其中的内容, study the Bible and meditate on its content. So we can see this kind of back reference. We've already mentioned 圣经 earlier on in the sentence. 其中 refers back to it and then connects it to the 内容 at the end of the sentence. 文章和其中的建议, article and its suggestions. 我喜欢这篇文章，觉得其中的建议非常实用. I like this article. I think its suggestions are very practical. 段落和其中的原则, paragraph and its principles. 段落以姐妹为例，但其中的原则也适用于弟兄. The paragraph uses sisters as an example, but the principles also apply to brothers. So to recap, 其中 means among them, of them, in it. And as an example sentence, we can say something like 研读圣经并沉思其中的内容, study the Bible and meditate on its contents. So on to the last point from this week's study article, and this time it's in paragraph 10, where we find this sentence. 意料之外的改变也能带来意想不到的福分. Unforeseen changes can bring unexpected blessings. So we see here two words that are synonyms and have very similar meanings. So the first one we'll look at is 意料之外. It means contrary to expectation or unexpected. To break that down further, 意料 means anticipate or expect. 之外 means outside. So 意料之外 is like saying outside of one's expectations or beyond expectations or simply unexpected. But the opposite to 之外, outside, is 之中, inside. So therefore, 意料之中 means within expectations or expected. So we can almost imagine our expectations as being like this box, and the results of a given situation being like this blue ball. So let's say that the situation is that I've made a fish flavored cheesecake. Then I invite some friends round and offer them a slice. 意料之中，他们都不想吃. Unsurprisingly, as expected, none of them wanted to eat it. So it's completely within expectations, 意料之中, that none of them wanted to eat my disgusting cheesecake. Now, another way to say this sentence would be 他们都不想吃，这是意料之中的事. None of them wanted to eat it, which is unsurprising. Conversely, 他们都愿意吃，这是意料之外的事. They were all willing to eat it, which was a surprise. It was unexpected. It was beyond or outside of expectations. We can also say 意料之外，他们都愿意吃. Surprisingly, unexpectedly, they were all willing to eat it. We can also see here back in paragraph 10 that 意料之外 can be used as an adjective. 意料之外的改变. And this is the same for 意想不到. Let's take a closer look at this word. 意想不到, previously unimagined, unexpected. So we can see it's a synonym of 意料之外, very similar meaning. Let's break this phrase down too. 意想 is a verb meaning imagine, expect. 不到 is something that we can attach to certain verbs to show that the verb was unaccomplished or that it cannot be accomplished, such as words that we're familiar with, 看不到. So here the verb is 看, which means look, and therefore 看不到 means cannot see. Similarly, 听不到, the verb is 听, which means listen, and therefore 听不到 means cannot hear. And that brings us back to 意想不到. The verb is 意想, which means to expect, and therefore 意想不到 means it cannot be expected or that it's unexpected. So again, looking at this sentence, 他们都愿意吃，这是意料之外的事. We could also say, 这是意想不到的事. This is unexpected, this is a surprise. Now, as a side point, you would rarely see this. 意想不到，他们都愿意吃. So unlike 意料之外, where we can put it at the beginning of a sentence, we rarely see that with 意想不到. Rather, you'd probably say, 没想到他们都愿意吃, which is something we learned in a previous lesson. So here are some more examples of the two phrases we just learned. 我学到了很多意想不到的东西. I learned a lot of things I had never expected to. So as we can see, 意想不到 can be used just like any other adjective. So, for example, 我学到了很多很好的东西. I learned a lot of good things. 我学到了很多有趣的东西. I learned a lot of interesting things. 我学到了很多有用的东西. I learned a lot of useful things. And back to 我学到了很多意想不到的东西. I learned a lot of unexpected things or things I had never expected to. 耶和华可能会用意想不到的方式来回应我们的祷告. Jehovah might answer our prayers in unexpected ways. 年轻人想独立是很正常的，也是意料之中的事. For youth to want independence is normal and to be expected or is within expectations. 为什么说我们遭受迫害是意料之中的事? Why do we expect persecution? So this perhaps highlights why it's useful knowing this other word for expect. We might have heard the word 期待 for expect, but that really means to look forward to something with anticipation, almost like we want it to happen. But in the context where we mean something is not a surprise and therefore we expect it, then 意料之中 is one word we can use to convey that meaning, like in this sentence here. 这通常会带来一些意料之外的问题。This can often lead to some unexpected problems. 后来发生的事可能是他意料之外的。He likely did not expect the things that happened next. So, in today's lesson, we've looked at how to say never did, 从没 verb 过, never does, 从不 verb, and never will do, 永远不会 verb. How to say within it, among them, 其中, and two ways to say unexpected, 意料之外, 意想不到. In the next lesson, we'll look at more on 其中, how to say not A but rather B, and two useful time phrases. See you next time.